This choir podcast is brought to you by the book, The God I Was Given, by me, Scott Lloyd. I wrote it for those who are seeking to embrace faith without the constraints of religion. For those who've discovered a God who doesn't keep a guest list, but throws block parties where everyone belongs. This book is for the weary, the wounded, and the hopeful. Anyone searching for a faith big enough to hold their questions and bold enough to ignite their wonder. The God I Was Given, available now on Amazon.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Actually, what's really weird is John is a sound designer by trade.
I didn't know that.
Why haven't you incorporated that particular skill set? We could have had a whole host of sound effects.
Well, what did you do for being a sound person by trade? What does that mean?
Well, let's do this. Let's introduce the show.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm not.
Okay. This is not church, everybody. All right.
Bethany,
go ahead.
let me mansplain this to you for a moment. See what happens, Bethany, is we.
Please teach me.
So we introduce the show first. This is not church. What should we call this? Like the.
I don't know. I was thinking, because I titled a family show.
No, it's not going to be family. It won't be family friendly. Don't do that. Keep it in the family. No, don't do that. That sounds terrible. I don't know. Sweet Home Alabama. Okay. Anyway, we're just going to talk to ourselves because we don't have a guest today. And I don't know. We thought maybe some of y'all would appreciate more of our musings. So often we end the show and we sit around and we talk for like 20 minutes afterwards and sort of debrief. And we're like, this is kind of fun. Why don't we just do this once in a while? So we're going to do this once in a while. And I was saying earlier that John, the elder statesman of the group, has been a sound designer for many years. Probably hasn't done much too recently, but for a long time, he was very, very active in local theater. And Bethany said, what does that mean? Go ahead.
Oh, so I'm supposed to describe what that means?
Well, I mean, like in the context of, say, like theater versus like movies or something like that.
And like how you implemented it into your life as, being in Humboldt.
Well, I mean, I was introduced to theater when I was 17 years old, and as a musician.
In high school?
In high school. My music teacher asked me if I would be interested in playing bass in a local theater's musical. Mm-hmm. And I was like, sure, I've never done anything like that. It sounds like fun. So that's how I was introduced to theater.
And what was that first show? Do you remember?
Tomfoolery.
Ooh, I love that show.
Yeah. So, and from there, I did a lot of musical theater, playing bass in the band. Okay. And from there, I decided I would try my hand at acting. Mm-hmm. And I acted in a few plays, and I was horrible at it.
Oh, I disagree. I never saw you, and I'm sure you were fine.
No, I was, there was, I can't remember which show I was in.
Greg, on the other hand, is very talented.
Oh, yes.
Wait, you didn't, Nat, you didn't go to visit your brother's shows? You didn't go support him?
I went and saw some.
Oh, okay.
I was a bit of a troglodyte in those days. I was like, musical theater? Isn't that just for the queer folk? and then, of course, I was also very staunchly religious. And so John was telling me these stories about all these people he's hanging out with who were all gay. And I was like, why would I want to subject myself to? I missed out so much.
Yeah,
so no, I absolutely went to see shows that I recognized. Like Little Shop of Horrors was fantastic. I went and saw, I forget, a handful. Anyway, when I got older and smarter, John did this for a long time. I mean, 20 plus years, 25. Yeah. I mean, years and years and years.
Yeah, mostly at Ferndale Repertory Theater. But then I also followed along with Redwood Curtain Theater. So I worked with Redwood Curtain Theater. I've worked with North Coast Rep.
Nice.
I've worked with Pacific Arts Center when it existed. I think it's now called Arcata Playhouse.
Do you want to get back into it at all?
Someday when I have more time.
Okay.
It is time consuming. It's rehearsals and being there. Even as a sound designer, it's really time consuming. And for sound design, so from musical theater into trying my hand at acting, I worked at a local theater called World Premiere Theater, which doesn't exist anymore, where I acted in plays that had never been produced before, ever. So we were the first to ever do it. That was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing that. But I just wasn't good at it. I really wasn't. I think that one of the directors I worked for at one point just told me he's like, for this character, just be yourself. I was like, I didn't even really understand what that meant, to be myself. And then I the show was videoed and I watched it and I was like, why didn't anyone tell me I was that bad? I was like, it's hard to watch. But I had a friend who was doing most of the sound design at the time, and he was getting ready to move, and I was just interested in what he did. So at one point I was like, can you teach me what you do to a certain extent, and maybe I can take over when you leave? And so I worked with him on a few shows. And then this was back when everything I had to do was on cassette. I did one show on reel to reel, which tells you how long ago I've been doing this. But that was just because the sound effects that I needed to use were on reel to reel, and then I had to convert them to cassette tape. So, and I've worked through cassette tape, I've worked through burning CDs, and then all the way up to using digital sound, which is what most people use now. But basically what I did is I created all the sound effects. So if there was a sound effect needed in the show, I would create that sound. I would create a pre-show song list. I am not at this. I have friends in this industry who actually produce and write their own music specifically, so they don't have to worry about copyright issues or anything like that. But I never got to that level. I did get to the level of creating my own sound effects out of different sounds and stuff like that. Nat actually helped me produce one song.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, we were doing a theme song for a sitcom.
We did a theme song for a sitcom that was part of a play, and so we created the song for the sitcom, which was kind of fun. That's probably the most I've done creating my own music, but the majority of what I did was creating sound effects. So if there was a sound of a tree falling, I'd make the sound of a tree falling. If there's dogs barking out in the distance, I'd make the sounds of the dogs barking.
Would you record those sounds in real life, or were you able just to kind of?
Sometimes I did. Sometimes I would. There's a lot of resources online nowadays. So obviously, prior to the digital part of it, I had to create a lot of my own and build my own sounds. And then as digital became the medium of the day, you could find a lot of prefab stuff, but then I'd have to build and kind of create my own sound by building them on top of something else. But I've did a lot of recording of people's voices. I did a show called The Woman in Black, and I had to have like blood curdling screams. And so
whoa.
I had the lady who actually did the part, the Woman in Black, and I had her, and it was like at midnight at a friend's house, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs. I'm like, we're going to get the police called on us.
For real.
Yeah.
Honest officer, we're just making a recording.
We're just doing sound effects. Yeah, right.
I'm going to need to come in and see. It's like, now, were those sound effects played live? Did you have to sit there through the show and trigger those effects?
As a designer, I would have an operator who would. So then part of this process is then doing what they call a Q to Q, which is working with the operators and then building lights and building sounds for the show. So then once the show is in rehearsal, we do that. And then once the show is up and running, there's a light operator and a sound operator that would operate those things for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
Did you ever find yourself being able to use those skills when you were a part of the church at one point, or was that not in conjunction?
The parts that I used was just helping build the computer system that we ended up using for sound. A friend of mine and I did that when I took over the worship team at Harvest. And then putting in the right equipment and putting in monitor systems, using in-ear monitors, that kind of stuff was something that I introduced as I was leading worship. So yeah, a little bit.
And did you guys ever go to church together, Nat and John? Were you guys ever part of
just as kids?
Just as kids.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Nat, when you started your church, did you consult John much about, like, since John had experienced such deconstruction in his life, were you just like, I need to listen to John's perspective on church life, or was it just something?
I don't know that I ever asked him specifically, but there was a period of time where John and I talked a lot, especially in the early days when he was sort of coming back, and you'll remember probably that I was worried because it wasn't like the church changed in the 25 years or whatever it was in his absence. I remember him telling me once, he's like, well, I just really feel like I need to get back to church. And I was like, no, you don't. like not right now. You don't. I'm like, coming back to some semblance of a belief system is one thing. Subjecting yourself to that can be very problematic. So there's, and I'm doing this from a distance, right? I'm still in Texas. He's in California. And I remember coming to visit him once, and we went to visit a church together. Remember that?
Yep.
And we made it about a third of the way through the sermon, and we're like, yeah, you ready to bounce? He's like, yeah, let's bounce. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't like they were bad. It was just, there was just things that even at that point in our lives were like maybe 10 years before I'd been like, yeah. And then now in that place, I was like, none of this is sitting right with me. Anyway. And so, when I was really happy for him when he found, the Calvary Chapel Church in Arcata, because they sounded very cool and a little more progressive. And that was cool. And I think they were for a while, but found pretty quickly that Calvary Chapel still is very heavy-handed, very controlling, and very end times oriented, which I didn't realize until much later. I never really was a fan of Harvest, but that's just because it's just not my style of church. It's very traditional, very Baptist. But then I also am like looking at John going, but if anybody can change these guys or have influence, not necessarily change, but have influence and have input. Yeah. If you're willing to give someone like John a seat at the table, and you're willing to hear his opinions, I'm not saying you have to agree with everything, but I'm like, that's a plus. I mean, that's at least, and I think Andy was open up until the point where he wasn't, if that makes sense. Like, I think early on, would you say that he was very open? Like, you guys talked a lot, and maybe you didn't agree, but he respected your opinion.
Even though I've left the church, we still,
yeah.
I mean, we still have issues, but we're friends, and he still listens to my opinion.
Yeah,
but he drew a line, and I think that's what, for me, what it comes down to is, and it may take a while to find it, but there will always be an arbitrary line an arbitrary line drawn, and you'll go, oh man, we were really cool up to here, and then you drew a line for some reason, and when I'm sure for John and for me both, it was LGBTQ stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we were Gracie, everyone's fine, everyone loves God, blah, blah, blah. And then we got to this issue of gay and trans folks, and all of a sudden there was this immovable line drawn for some fucking reason. And they just could not get their heads out of their own asses long enough to see that what they were doing is harmful. Like, they could not prioritize human beings over dogma. And John had this experience. I had this experience. I'm sure maybe you've had this experience in some places where you just go, why there? Why'd you draw the line there? Why is suddenly that something we can't get past? We can get past all kinds of other stuff. And it might not be that. It would be something different in every place you might go. I started getting really hard pushback in the church I left a while back, and they drew a hard line at the heaven and hell thing.
That was the one that you were really experiencing a lot of church trauma when you were still living here? Okay.
No. Yeah. I don't even know where my head was at when I was, so my first really big church experience / church job was in one of the bigger churches here in San Angelo. And I started deconstructing there. I told Brian McLaren this because I love the story. I was starting to read outside of my own, just my own, like I was not going to Lifeway or whatever Bible bookstore. I was buying books that other people recommended, and somebody had recommended Brian McLaren's book, A Generous Orthodoxy, which I've reread, and it's pretty damn tame. I loved it. I was reading Brennan Manning, A Ragamuffin Gospel. I'm reading stuff that's, it's just good stuff as far as breaking you out of fundamentalism and stuff like that. And so I read a generous orthodoxy, and all it is a case for ecumenicalism. It's just because Brian McLaren would claim all those traditions as his own. The very, very long subtitle is like, why I am and I'll get all the names wrong, but it's basically Baptist, Lutheran, Anabaptist, blah 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 blah. Why I am all these things. Because he would probably say still, he just embraces every part of those traditions that resonate with him. Loved the book, gave it to my pastor at the time. I'm like, man, this is good. You should read that. And I don't know, a while later, I asked him about it, and he basically said, if that's the kind of books you're reading, maybe we should reconsider your employment here. And I was like, oh, so I'll take this back. So coming to California was, coming back to Eureka was such a weird, it would almost, it was such a confluence of events that I convinced myself it was God.
Did you come back for a job?
Yeah, I came back for a job.
Okay.
But I've never had a situation in my life that lined up perfectly like this. It was just the weirdest, like right place, right time, every time, right?
Yeah.
I come back to my mom and dad's, I come back, and this is like 2006 probably, come back to Eureka. Mom and dad are back in church and they're really excited about this church. And they're back to the church that John and I spent a lot of our youth in. And I'm like, really? And they're like, oh, you're really going to like this new pastor. He's a really good dude. And so I'm like, you know what? Cool. So at that point, I was still at the church I just talked about. So anyway, so they're like, just when you visit, come see the church. So went to church. Something was off with the music. And I was like, look at my mom, and she's like, oh yeah, the worship leader quit. Like about a month or two, we still don't have a new worship leader. So they've just been having people come and fill in. I think Derek was filling in from time to time, and Trent, you remember Trent, he was filling in. Anyway, so when I was there that week, it was bad. It was just like, and as a musician, I'm not being a jerk, but I'm like, it's just like, ooh. So anyway, my mom said something that triggered me. She said, or triggered a thought. She's like, well, yeah, they haven't hired a new one. I was like, what do you mean hired? Like the entire time I'd been in church, I've been a volunteer. I didn't know anybody got paid to do that. And like, this is a job. They paid somebody. Oh yeah. From what I understand, they paid him pretty well. I'm like, you don't say. So I hung out after. She's like, well, hang out after church. Well, Bill wasn't there that day, I don't think. I think I talked to Beth. And so I talked to Beth. And anyway, long story short, I went back to Texas. Bill reached out a couple weeks later and was like, I was actually in Florida visiting my wife's grandmother at the time. And he's like, well, we'd sure like to talk to you about coming out and doing this. And in the interim, he'd been online. We'd been posting our church services online for a while with the music and everything. So he'd had a chance to see me lead worship. And he's like, I think you might be a good fit. We'd like to fly you back to California for a week, have you hang out with us for a week, have you lead worship service on a weekend, and then get the board to sign off or not on hiring you. I was like, sweet. So all that stuff happened, and I went back out, and I knew half the board members. I mean, these were, people that I'd known growing up. And anyway, yeah, it was a good deal. They hired me on the spot, and we made the transition. I made the decision to leave my wife and kids in Texas so they could finish the semester out. This was like right before school was getting out. Mm-hmm. And anyway, lots and lots of stuff happened. Go ahead.
So you showed up there the same time that we showed up to start Catalyst, because we started Catalyst in 2006.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was there.
So we moved up here at the same time.
Yeah. I started in 2007.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So like right around Christmas time.
Okay.
Yeah. Late 2007, I should say. So it might have been 2007 when I first started, though. Maybe not 2006. But it was weird. It was just a very strange thing. And,
yeah,
I liked it, man. I had a really good month.
Yeah. Really good month. How long were you there? How long were you in California?
Not even a year.
No way.
Just under a year. Oh, yeah. I was ready to go. Wow. I was ready to go at month 2. But my wife and family were still moving. And so
So you knew right away, basically.
Yeah, but I couldn't admit that.
So before we started talking, you were saying like how it was hard to even just drive to work to even see the pastor's car in the parking lot, and how
my stomach.
How much anxiety came about with that. Like, how long did you think you could handle living that way?
So here's what happened. About a month or so in, and I'm used to, at this point, I've been in the military. I have, I haven't had a job in 10, 15 years, maybe more, where I had to punch a clock and answer you were trusted to do your job. You had a job to do, go get it done. Even in the military, it was not that, I had places to be, but so I just had adopted this, hey, I was a salaried employee for this church. I sort of came and go as I felt, as I saw fit.
You knew your responsibilities.
Yeah, if I could do some work from home, or if I could do some work at the coffee shop, I didn't have to sit in my office and just lock myself away. So what happened was, I think, and he never said this out loud, but I think what happened was he would come by the office randomly and I wouldn't be there. And he'd be like, where's that guy? He's not doing any work. I'm like, anyway, the other part of that was he sprung some extra stuff on me when I started working there. So I never even claimed to know anything about the stuff he asked me to do later. He's like, oh, you realize that this is not your responsibility. My responsibility was to lead a team of videographers who videoed the church service every weekend and then put it into a weekly TV show. So that actually had to be edited, cut together. If he preached for 45 minutes, I only had 28 and a half minutes to put on.
Whoa.
So I didn't know anything about that. There was, we filmed in the sanctuary with 3 cameras. There was a director who was switching between camera angles. And there's all this stuff. I don't know a thing about this stuff. So all of a sudden that was just like, oh, by the way, you do this too.
Well, but at that point, it's not like YouTube was around where you could be like, okay, let me just research how to put these things together.
I mean, Derek was still on staff at the time, and Derek was a great resource, but he was also, a 20-something guy who didn't feel like holding the hands of a 40-year-old dude.
Totally.
He's like, so he didn't have time. He had his own stuff to do. He didn't have time to sit there and walk me through hours and hours of instruction on how to video edit, but all that stuff. So little bit by little bit, things started creeping in that started making me go, okay, I don't know. Like I mentioned before offline, like basically making me fill out a weekly timesheet, keep notes on from 10 to 11, I did this. And from 11 to 12, I did this. And from 12 to 1, I took lunch. And then from 1 to 2, I had to turn that in every week. We had Saturday night and 2 Sunday services. At the end of the Saturday night service, we would have what he called a bull session, which was basically, hey, let's go fuck with Nat and tell him all things did wrong session. So we would have church, and then we would go to that little green room, which was my office behind the stage, and I would get chewed out for whatever, because the music we were playing didn't sound enough like the recordings that we were mimicking. So, so I had to answer for that. I was responsible for if the sound guy screwed up and the sound wasn't perfect. I heard about that every week because it was a hard sanctuary to do sound in, and I wasn't a sound guy. I was a fucking... So you're here to lead this team. You need to know about all this stuff. So I had to really deeply immerse myself in how to run sound. He got really, really anal about tempo at one point, and the songs were. So he made me every week listen back to the recording of the service, and then write down the tempo of the song it was supposed to be played at, and the tempo of the song we played it, and tell him how far off we were.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wild.
Was he a musician?
Yeah.
Oh.
And which I thought in the beginning, like, that's cool. He'll understand. This is a guy who gets it. And it could go that way. Because the last church I worked at and led worship in, the guy wasn't a music guy at all. He didn't know. He couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. He was like, sounds good to me. Let's roll. And I never heard a thing about it. And the guy, honestly, the other 2 churches I worked at before, they weren't music guys. They didn't care. As long as the people enjoyed it, they weren't getting complaints. As long as they weren't getting people going, the drums are too loud. But I would say about 6 months in, I'm like, this was a mistake. And I uprooted my family, moved them across the country for this mistake, which, in retrospect was a bit of I think there were things there. I just didn't want to see them because I really was enamored of the idea of going home. I'm like, this was a chance for me to go home, be around my family again, do something I thought I would really love. I'm like, this is the best of all these worlds. I get to, live near my folks and my brother and all the rest of my family. I get to do a job that I'm actually going to get paid to do something I love. I remember telling my mom when I quit that I had to come tell her, like, we've been living with them. They've had access to all 4 of their grandkids for almost a year. I'm sure they were ready for us to beat the hell out of their house. But this is all they'd ever wanted, was access to their grandkids and, family around. And I had to go sit down with her and be like, we're leaving.
Wow.
And she's like, why? I'm like, because this guy's making me hate music.
Why did you leave to go back to Texas? Why not just stay in California?
I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I panicked. I did with this thing I did every day, and I did this for about 3 months. Every day, I would go. I would leave work, and I would go. Kim was homeschooling the kids at my mom and dad. She was to be fair, she wasn't super happy either. She was raising 4 kids in someone else's house.
That's hard.
I don't care how well everyone gets along, and we all did get along well. I don't care how well you get along. That's not easy.
Yeah,
it's not easy as a mom to discipline and raise your kids under the eye of your mother-in-law.
Oh my gosh, seriously.
And my mom's a good mother. She wasn't. It could have been way worse, but it's still not. It's never going to be ideal. So I'm like, I could go home. I'm like, so what I would do is I would go, we'd go buy a pack of cigarettes because I was smoking again. This guy drove me to drink and to smoke. And I would go to Sequoia Park in the back where the fountain is.
Okay.
To walk those trails. And I would smoke about a half pack of cigarettes and I would pace.
Wow.
And I would think, like, how do I get out of this? Like, what do I do? How do I get out of this? Like, I can't do this. I already knew then. I'm like, I can't do this for much longer. This is not healthy. But it took
so
me.
You recognize the unhealth in that moment, that you were like succumbing to unhealthy habits.
Yeah. And I knew that the least unhealthy thing I was doing at that moment was smoking.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a way, like, it was like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was bad, but staying there was not an option. It was not tenable. I didn't know of anybody else in that town that would have like hired me to do that. I would have had to go back to doing some other job I hated.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in that mode of like, I don't know what to do. I just know I have to leave. I don't know what to do. I just know. So I finally I'm walking down this trail amongst the redwoods, smoking my Camel Lights or whatever the hell I was smoking. And, I just made a phone call, and I'm like, I had to eat crow. And the pastor, when I left Texas, did not want me to leave. He was nice enough, supportive enough, but he, basically told me I was making a mistake. So now I got to call this guy and say, okay, so here's the thing. You were right. I made a mistake. I want to come back home. What can you do for me? And he was like, we'll get it done. I said, okay.
What were you doing at that church? Like, you actually had a job there?
Yeah, I was teaching high school and leading worship. So I got paid like 80% of my salary came from the school I worked in. And then they paid me a stipend to lead worship. But he was like, anyway, essentially, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. He was great. We'd been renting our house to people that were in the church they hadn't paid us rent in 3 months.
Oh, goodness.
And I'm like, oh, well, so anyway, so I called him and he knew them. I'm like, hey, okay, so here's the thing. We need to move back and I need these people out of our house. And so he's like, done. I'll take care of it. I have a rental, or I know someone who does. We'll get them moved into a different house. And he paid movers, or paid us to hire I paid my moving expenses basically to get back to Texas. And so I was like, oh, and anyway, so all that worked out. I mean, the kids were mad. We moved to California. They were sure shit mad when we left. I was making everybody mad. My parents were not happy, but they were cool, but they were not happy. And then as soon as I got back to Texas, I wasn't happy because that dude fucked me 10 ways from Sunday.
Wait, the pastor that wanted you to come back?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah.
What? Gosh, I'm so sorry. What happened there?
So I came back and I'm like, so you wanted me back? I'm back. And he's like, well, here's the thing. We can't afford to pay you to be a full-time staff person. So we got to find something else for you to do. In the meantime, between the time I'd left and come back, the private school that I had been working at had applied for and been granted a charter to become a charter school. So he's like so this was like, I don't remember when we came back, but whatever it was months and months before the next school year. So for that, remainder of that time, so from the time we got back till the time, like maybe through summer, I was a janitor. He's like, well, you could clean the church building. It's a pretty bitch. Anyway, so I was a janitor and he put me in the classroom. It's like, you could take over, you can teach. And at that time, we only had Spanish. I taught Spanish. We only taught it as an elective 2 days a week or 3 days a week. So I was basically part-time teacher, part-time janitor, part-time worship leader for half of what I was making in California. It was barely subsistence level living, right? And then he's like, and then the summertime, I don't know what we're going to do. But then when school comes around in the fall, I'll hire you. And then you'll be a for real, like, public school teacher. And then you'll get, anyway. So summertime, they got their charter and we had to convert an old church building over the summer. Over the course of 2.5 months, we had to convert this whole building into a viable place to have school. So that's what I did for the whole summer, was pound nails and paint and help
you
the
were getting paid for that, though, at least?
Yeah.
Were you getting
So this is why this guy's such a dickhead. He put me on salary for the janitor job. It's like, hey, I need you to come in here like 5 days a week. And the cool thing was on that job, I would bring my wife and kids with me. I'm like, hey, we're all going to go up to the church building. You're going to help Daddy empty the trash. If I could get it done in an hour and a half, we could go. I'm like, hey, we get this done quickly. We're going to Olive Garden or something. We're going to go over to Dairy Queen. So they were, for a little while, they were like, woohoo, and they got to run around the church and they got to help me take out trash. And it wasn't that hard of a job. It was fine. And then, but that was paid on a salary. And I was fine with that because I was really only working about 10 hours a week on that job and doing okay. He gave me that same salary to be a full-time grunt over the summer. And I would work from like 6 a.m. to like 6 at night.
Wow.
Whoa.
and sweat and be, do all the stuff,
Yeah.
and painting and pounding nails and lifting and carrying stuff. And when I griped about it, I was like basically told I wasn't in great. And I'm like, yeah, but you're paying me $1.47 an hour now, buddy.
Jeez.
I did the math. This isn't right or fair. But anyway, it is what it is. I sound like an idiot, but I do. I look back. I wrote a lot of this. I didn't write as much detail, but I wrote about this in the book. And I'm like, I just even saying some of this stuff out loud. I was like, God, what the hell? Like, what? But you live, you learn, you do what you do.
Yeah.
I think most of the time we believe the best in people, and we want to trust them that they have our best in mind, and that they want good for us. And so, that's why we stay in situations that probably aren't healthy for us way longer than we should. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened to you. Like you went into all these situations wanting to be a blessing, wanting to be helpful, and because it's also benefiting you, but yet it really didn't benefit you. It came at a huge cost.
It did. And I've come to terms with the fact that there were equal parts altruism. I really did want to do good things. I want to be somewhere where what I'm doing matters. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to just go flip hamburgers. I've done that for 5 years before. Nothing wrong with the food service business. I love it, but I felt, I just wanted to do something but there was also something that I had to tackle that was like, there was an ego involved in that too. And I saw the way that people who were in maybe the inner circle of our churches were treated. I'm like, ooh, I'd like that. I want the invites to the secret meetings. I want the invites to the little parties. I want to go to lunch with the pastor and rub elbows with you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I want to, and there is something, I don't care who you are or how big or how small your stage is. There is something very, very enticing about the stage. You can get used to the accolades, even if I don't care. Like I said, I don't care if it's 10 people telling you you're great or 500 people telling you you're great. There is something that you have to contend with there. Like I naively was like, I don't care about any of that. But of course I did. Of course I'm a human who doesn't love being told they're great all the time. I lived for the comments. It was like, man, I came to your church and we stayed. We came for this, but we stayed for the music. I'm like, oh, people are, that's a little bad, a little feather in my cap. So there's that. Both those things can be true at the same time. And I have a friend who is very cynical like me, but, about 10 years before I left the church, he left and he was like, had started opining about some of this stuff, like the danger of wanting to be on the stage and wanting to be elevated. And I'm like, my stage is only like 2 feet tall. He's like, you get what I'm saying. And I'm like, well, you're just whatever. And well, it turns out he was 100% right. I think that's, there's that danger for everybody. I still watch the way I see, some people that I know, the guy I worked for, he loved to have an entourage. And so,
what do you mean?
So he
like
would,
people following him around?
Same sort of situation at the one church, like like there's a stage where church happens. And then behind the stage was this green room, right? And so every Sunday it was like this. He would go into the green room with his mighty men, whoever they were, the guys in the green jackets, with the lapel mics and the radios, so they could, big eagles on big guys on the move.
So gross.
Yeah, so he's in that, and they're all, they would gather. I've been in there a handful of times, so I know what happens. They're all over in there, they're all laying hands on each other and praying, and then about two. I was only ever playing like three or four worship songs. My worship sets were intentionally short. So by the third song, he's emerging from around the stage he's flanked by his little group of men in their green blazers, who then escort him to his seat and then like take position at the end of the rows and,
This was in Texas or in Humboldt?
It was in Texas. Yeah,
Oh
Bill,
my
I will say
gosh.
for all of that, Bill was never that. Bill was the guy on the front row,
Yeah.
fully participating in worship every single time.
Okay.
Like he was there and engaged. Although I still think that was what's the word? I think that was very performative, because you can't be that engaged and also that critical. Like I've been in places where I'm just pulled into what's happening. There's no way in hell I'm that engaged and I'm that pulled into what's happening, and I'm also noticing the tempo of the song is off by 5 beats per measure. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's no way I'm there. And I'm also noticing I can't hear the bass clearly on this side, but we really need to we probably should move where our subwoofers are because we're not getting it good. Like, so that was fairly performative as well. He wanted people to see, and he told me that, you know what, I can say that because that's exactly what he told me was like, the people in the church need to see me as, he's like, you're the worship leader, but I'm the lead worshiper.
Oh man, we had people at our church tell Jason and I that all the time. You guys need to raise your hands in worship. You need to like really show everybody that you're in this because you're modeling it for them. And I'm like,
that's exactly right.
They're like, you need to be in the front so they can see what it means to worship. And I'm just like, this feels so gross to me because it has nothing to do with like where my heart is. It's really about like, how do I convince people that this is important?
Yeah.
That's not my job. My job isn't to convince somebody that's important. That's God's business.
There's nothing authentic about it, right?
No.
There's nothing. And
people see through that bullshit so easily too.
And they do. And there's like two parts of that are gross. One is it's performative and inauthentic. And second part that's gross is you think the people in there are dumb enough to fall for it.
Totally.
Like totally. You just, that's you looking down on the people in your congregation and thinking they're too dumb to figure out that you're not really doing this for the right reasons. And, again, but it's weird. So that was I can look at all these places where I've served and I can go, yeah, they were different, but they had these things in common. There was still this elevation of the person or people on the stage. People wanted to be on the worship team or wanted to be, in some, they didn't want to go serve the coffee, or didn't want to go help in the parking lot. They were wanting to be someplace where they could be visible. And of course I'm sitting there going, well, that's not a very good motivation. All the while I'm the guy who's on the stage all the time. It's a little disingenuous. So I don't know, man, if I have an issue, I've heard of church models. And I would think like specifically of like the Quakers, and I'm not sure their theology is terrible. But the model they have for church gatherings is a lot more ecumenical. So there isn't a pastor, there isn't a leader. There was a church that Baxter Kruger talked about in one of the older Celtic churches that actually met in all of their meeting spaces were round, so that there would not be anybody at the head of anything, kind of like the Knights of the Round Table thing, right? Like we just sit in a circle and we do this. I don't know. I got to a point where I didn't see the model of me or somebody standing at the front and being the ones who delivered the message all the time as being sustainable. Like, I don't know. It's still one of the things that bothers me the most. I don't want to be looked at as some sort of, guru or, someone who might have all the answers. So I probably undermined myself when I was a senior pastor for however long I was. I undermined myself an awful lot.
What do you mean?
Because I'd be like, hey, because I would say that from the pulpit all the time. There's lots of stuff I don't know. I am not claiming that I'm right about all this stuff. You should probably go double check everything I've told you. You should probably verify. You should probably pray about this thing I've told you. See how it sits with you. And then come talk to me about it. I'm not an authority. I don't have some special, and that was the thing. Every pastor I ever worked for at that point always at some point would claim to have special revelation. Right? The pastor in Texas, literally every Sunday, he probably still says this. He would pray before he would speak, and he would, allow me, God, just to speak as an oracle of God. I'm like, you're an oracle? Okay, so now I have to trust you because you've gotten a special word from God. And you've just set yourself in a place to potentially be unquestioned about whatever bullshit you say next. And trust me, the bullshit was plentiful. There was lots and lots of it. But, he's the guy with a special relationship. He's the guy who, God has revealed things to. And it's not for us mere mortals to question.
It's so easy to get manipulated in situations like that. And you see it in church all the time where people are following hook, line, and sinker, these folks who have somehow a revelation from the Lord. And it's really, I'm curious, like after all these things that you've experienced, not just like being in these church settings that were very hierarchical, but also like being hurt, being told that you're not doing the right thing or whatever it is. How did you heal? Like, what did healing look like? Or what does healing look like for you?
So at first, healing meant, honestly, this is going to sound like bullshit, but it's true. Healing meant owning my part in it.
Okay.
I had to at some point, okay, what role did I play in this? And that sounds a little bit like victim blaming, but that's not what I mean. I wasn't victim blaming so much. It was, how do I prevent this from happening again? Why do I keep putting myself in these situations where I'm susceptible to the manipulation of authoritative people? That's not healthy. So that was part of it. Part of it was distance. I just had to leave, and to be fair, I have not returned, and I don't have any intention to return. I don't know I couldn't even describe to you what faith, if any, I have anymore. I will tell you this, for those of you who are still listening and paying attention or care, if you haven't turned us off by now, because all I've done is yammer, I'm really happy. Like all of the dire predictions of every, charlatan preacher I've ever worked for, worked with, who said, if you did this, then this is all going to fall to shit. Everything's going to go like it. No, it hasn't. I have not climbed into a life of sin. I didn't leave the church because I just wanted to go sin more. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know I don't even think in terms of sin or not sin. I don't know. I haven't felt that like there's this gaping hole of something missing. I've tried to fill that place of, I missed some of the sort of intentional community that we had, but I've tried to fill that with other things. So I don't know. I don't know that I'm healed, to be fair. And all I could, the only way I can tell you that's true is even talking about this stuff right now is like, ooh, I remember that. That brings back some some hurt. John's had the same. I know you've had the same. What kind of church hurt have you experienced? Because I'm sure you've had your fair share.
Who are you asking that?
Bethany. I haven't.
Oh, me?
She's been asking the questions, and I've just been. Oh. I mean, I would imagine. Allow me to assume for a moment that as a woman, in the church, especially as a woman in leadership in the church, you've experienced your fair share of slings and arrows. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I was really protected in many ways because I grew up believing that women shouldn't be in the church in a leadership form in the church, especially leading adults, adult males specifically. So that wasn't something that I was fighting against at all. Growing up. And it wasn't until we had started Catalyst and I was just sharing on Sundays every once in a while. I wasn't like preaching because I just shared my heart. So I wasn't going against God. And I was just like, oh man,
So you found a loophole.
Exactly. So yeah, when I was sharing my heart, and something clicked in me where I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. I love this so much. I love preparing sermons. And because the church that we started was already very open to female voices, it was an easy on-ramp for me. The hardest thing was myself. I was the hardest person that I came against in the beginning. And it took me a while to receive that for myself. But I never really came across too much boundary markers in the church that we pastor. I've definitely had people leave in the middle of a sermon because once they realize that I'm not getting off of the podium or whatever, then
you're not there just to make announcements, and
I'm not there just doing announcements. Exactly.
Maybe pray over the offering.
Exactly.
You're going to stay the whole time, Bethany?
Wait, she's reading from the Bible now? What?
Whoa, hold up.
Yeah, really.
So that's happened before, but it was never with people that I knew personally, so it didn't hurt my feelings. And then when we were thinking of Catalyst becoming part of a denomination, we were looking for denominations that ordain women specifically that we would get involved with. And so we looked into Presbyterians and Lutherans, a lot of mainline, because most of the mainlines ordain women, and then Covenant also ordains, and Assemblies of God, but I was never really into Assemblies of God stuff. So we became United Methodists, and they went through the ordination of women ages ago. So it was no big deal for them. Sorry, when I say we became Methodist, just Jason, my husband, and I became Methodist. The Catalyst stayed non-denominational.
Yeah.
Well, but there's definitely been church hurt, but honestly, the church hurt that I have had really happened at Catalyst with the previous pastors because of just, it was just a lot of gross stuff that was happening under the surface in behind our backs that we didn't realize was going on. And when we started the church, we started it with this other couple that they're from this area, and that this was going to be their home. And for us, we were only going to stay for 5 years. And then like 4.5 years in, they were like, we're not staying. And we're like, oh, okay. And they moved down to San Diego, but we just felt like we wanted to stay. Like we wanted to make Humboldt home. So we stayed with the church, which has never been a burden. It's always been a hard thing financially, but never like a burden emotionally or spiritually. But it was really hard to see like these people that were our best friends, just like peace out, without really even wanting to say goodbye or anything.
Wow.
And that was really painful. And he was the main teaching pastor, like brilliant teacher. But so I kind of stepped in after he left. And
have you noticed though that sometimes the best people who are best, like they're the best at communicating or they're really good teachers, are sometimes kind of shitty people?
Oh, dude, he was such a shitty person. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's the kind of person, oftentimes people that are good communicators and are more charismatic like that and like draw a crowd or people are drawn to them. It's like they can't be present to any of it because they're always thinking of the next thing and the next experience of whatever's going to like. Well,
and weirdly, some of those people are in their personal lives, I'll just at least two of them were extremely introverted. So part of me understands that, like being on stage every Sunday took a lot out of them. There was a tax, paid for that. Bill never worked Mondays because by the time Saturday and Sunday were done, he was wiped. He was done. And he would go to his cabin and you would like, do not call him on Monday. That was his day to like recover. But I have all these, I had a church in Maryland that Kim and I were a part of where I was basically on staff there too. And man, I could listen to this guy preach for hours. Like he was just an excellent communicator, really had a way of breaking stuff down that was simple and still profound. Like he wasn't dumbing it down. He was just making it accessible. And we would just sit there and just go, wow, this is great. And then he was just a kind of a POS, treating people behind the scenes very, very badly. And, of course, didn't find that out till we got pulled into the more, to the smaller circles. That's my new definition. I don't see church anymore as hierarchical in the way it's not stratified top to bottom. It's an inside out thing. There are in any given church, there's probably, 4 to 6 people who are right there in the center, there. And those people, by the way, are interchangeable. I've seen them come and go, but if they're in that orbit, they're the ones who go on trips with the pastor's family and they hang out all the time and they do stuff and they raise their kids together and they're very close. I've never been in that circle with anybody.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what was interesting when you left California was how mom and dad were outside of the circle.
Oh yeah.
Before you came to the church, and then not to the inner sanctum, but they were pulled in. And then they were unceremoniously removed from the circle when you left.
Yeah. Yeah. My parting with that church was not amicable. It came on the heels of Bill had gotten into the habit of making these offhanded comments that he'd made a mistake in hiring me. He's like, well, maybe we just made a mistake. And I'd go have these, because we'd sit down in his office and I'd have the meetings every Saturday after church. And then once a week, I'd have also another dressing down in his office in private, where he would then go over my timesheet and look at the stuff that we'd done. And I'd have to give him my reports on the tempos of the songs we played. And, all very belittling, right? And then he would just very, very, I'm the boss, you're the, you know what I mean? It was belittling.
And so controlling. Everything had to be exactly the way that he wanted it to be.
Literally would walk in there I felt like I was walking into the principal's office every week. Because, and if there wasn't mostly criticism, I was like, ooh, that was a good meeting. It was usually 90% criticism, 10% you're doing a good job. But there started to be these more and more these offhanded comments of, maybe I think maybe we made a mistake. I think he meant that. I think in his brain he was baiting me to do better, like prove me wrong.
Yeah,
I'm like, you wanted me here, dude. What are you talking about? You. Anyway, so there was for this guy that preached so much about grace, there was no grace at all for any of that. It was just legal, hardline, perform or don't. And so in between one of those times he said that was the last time. And that was when I had gone to the woods. I went to the woods and I made a phone call, and I planned my escape. I was like, I'm out. I had it all planned. I talked it over with Kim. I'm like, we got to go. Like, we can't. And she was like, yeah, we got to go. We can't stay here. She could see I was a different person. I was broken. I was quiet and sullen. You know what I mean? It was just I'm not that way. I'm a fairly gregarious person. I like to laugh. I like to party.
What about Kim?
And I was just more.
What was Kim like? Was she involved in the church? And then when you were bouncing out, she bounced out too?
She was never. So this is part of what was weird about. So they made a point of telling us when they hired me, and they had, I will say this. I for whatever experience I had with pastor's wife, I thought she was great. She was a nice person. I'm sure she's complicit in a lot of the bullshit, but she was always very nice to us. They made a point of telling us that when I was hired, like, they weren't hiring me and getting Kim for free, which is the habit in a lot of churches. Like, hey, we've hired you, and by the way, now we expect your wife to do a bunch of volunteer work. And she's like, no, we don't expect that. So she got involved where she wanted to, but she never really felt comfortable there. My kids didn't really like it there. There were people there they liked, but in general, they never really dug the feel of it. That it's hard to boil down, but they just never felt really settled. Kim never really felt like she got pulled into the like the leadership circle of women that were never at, So when it was time to go, she was like, yeah, she didn't have anything holding her there. She was like, yeah, let's go. So, but I made the decision. I'm like, I gotta tell the boss I'm leaving. So I invited him to breakfast at the Village Pantry, which I still love, the Village Pantry. My parents are big Adele's folks, so we never go to the pantry anymore. But anyway, so I invited him to breakfast, and we sat down to have breakfast, and I just basically told him, it's been fun, but I'm out. Mm-hmm. He's like, whoa, what do you mean? He's like, and we literally, I think we'd had the last conversation where he basically told me he shouldn't have hired me. It was like a day or two before.
What?
And he's like, this isn't about like that thing I said.
You're like, yes, it is. Wow.
No, because I think it was the first time that I didn't just go, He said, maybe we made a mistake hiring you. And I said, I can remedy that. And he's like, well, and he just kind of, I don't remember what his response was, honestly, but it wasn't, he either didn't acknowledge what I'd said, or which was typical. So I saw him, the next time I saw him was when I quit. And I'm like, he's like, this isn't about, I'm like, yeah, it's 100% about that. Yeah. I can't do this anymore, man. You're pulling me in all these different directions. Nothing's ever good enough for you. And I'm not interested in pleasing you. It's not, I don't see the payoff. So I'm going to go. I've got my job back in Texas, and and he's like, basically it was like, okay, see ya. And at that point, he did the same thing that happened at a couple of places. I'm like, I was done. Like, it wasn't like, we're not leaving for, so he's like, no, you're done. You're done. Like, oh, so I didn't even get to say goodbye to my team. I basically got to go back to the office, clear my, no, there was no, like, hey, Nat's moving on. We're going to send him on to, no, I was just there one day, and I was just, well, here's what sucks. And I'm sure you could predict, because I'm there one day and I'm gone the next. No explanation necessarily given to anybody, but lots of room left to wonder, and left to, what's the
gossip
word I'm looking for? Yeah, gossip, and there's a word. And just make up your own stories and go, oh, I bet it was this, and I bet it was this, and could have done the classy thing. Just, hey, we'll come back next Sunday. We will send you off with goodwill and a prayer.
Right.
And, nah.
It's like he took it so personal or something like that.
Yeah. The same thing happened at the church in Texas. I was leaving. I'd been there for years, man. This is a church I'd served for on and off, probably 10 years. And, we were coming to the end of a school year, and Kim and I had just decided, because they had not figured out whether I was still like basically full-time in church and full-time in school. And I'm like, I'm being pulled. So I'd had multiple sit downs with them. Like, you need to figure out what side you want me on. I'm either going to be full-time over here. I'm happy to do either one. My preference would be to be full-time staff in ministry. That's what wanted. But if not, I'm not going to keep doing both. So I'd had that conversation, and towards the end of the school year, they had not made any moves towards one or the other. So I had to sit down with the assistant pastor and just say, hey, school gets out on May, whatever it was. The next day, my wife and I are packing our car, and we are going to go to California, and we won't be back until school starts again. But I won't be coming back as your worship leader. At this point, though, it's like February. I've given them March, April, and May to find a replacement for me to help transition somebody into that role. So there would be all kinds of smooth pass down, and it could just be like, and they could say, hey, Nat's leaving on. He's going to do this other thing. And it didn't have to be a big deal. And instead he fired me. He's like, oh, well, why don't you go ahead and just go pack your crap and go? I'm like, oh. I'm like, I'm happy to do that. That's fine. But the same thing, I had to quell rumors for 6 months about why we actually left, because I was just there one day and gone the next. So, but churches thrive. A lot of churches thrive. I should not paint with a broad brush. I get that. A lot of churches thrive on secrecy and they don't love, there's transparency. That's not their thing. So you're oftentimes left to wonder where people went.
Yeah. Well, we saw that growing up.
Oh yeah, we did. John and I's church history is very weird. Talk about Faith Center version 1.
Multiple youth pastors leaving and disappearing for unknown reasons.
Wow.
There was the youth pastor at one church that had an affair with one of his students. Why do I even say it that way? No, he didn't. He sexually assaulted one of his students.
Sexually assaulted.
Sorry, totally. Having an affair makes it sound too dignified.
Right. Right.
It wasn't that. But we also had a pastor at the same church at Faith Center who left because he was sleeping with his secretary.
Dang.
And but he was same deal, man. He came and like he resigned. He actually did. I don't remember because I was pretty young, but he did come and resign, sort of come clean with the church and say, this happened, I'm leaving. That church did not fully recover from that until Bill came. So 30 years it took for them to kind of recover and get back to, so they've seen a lot of this stuff, man, in churches that tend to be very structured and very hierarchical in that way.
Well, and even the word recover is loaded in of itself, because they may have recovered from that trauma, but in many ways that church and churches like it have a history of secrecy and that hierarchy that makes it so people disappear. They get disappeared from staff.
Absolutely.
When things aren't going the way that it's supposed to go, when you are pushing an envelope or pushing anything, or even if you were somebody who was on staff and you were a leader in the church, as in the interim times between pastors, and you're leading, the next pastor comes on, and because you had a leadership position, that pastor might feel threatened and you're gone.
Well, I don't know if it's like Foursquare has a rule as a denomination that when a pastor leaves and they hire a new pastor, everyone's essentially fired.
That was my church growing up, a Baptist church.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And the pastor has he has the option to retain the people he wants to basically rehire them or not. And I'm sure a lot of times there's not a wholesale changing of the guard, but every time.
But they have the option.
But they have the option to clean house and go.
And which is like it's so against Scripture. It's so against how Jesus did things. Why would we want to? It's very much the way the world works. You get a new CEO and he can hire and fire anybody that they want. But I thought we were supposed to be different than the way the world works. Well, and that here we are plugging and playing with the same.
And I don't know what's better, because I've served in churches where, and I'm sure you have too, I've served in churches where the pastor was the guy.
Right.
It was that guy calls the shots. The church the church that I talked about at length, when I left to join my friend's church that he started, he was so scared about becoming that he advocated almost all of his authority to a board.
Wow.
Which was fine, except he had terrible taste in people he chose for board members.
Oh no.
And he actually, I don't think he'd admit this, but it was almost always people who were, either really friendly with him or were big contributors. So that was like I was there for all these years. I was never invited to be an elder or serve on the board, even though at the time I'm 40 something years old. I've been a Christian most of my life. been in leadership positions. I asked them, like, why have you never invited me to be a board member? And it was because I did not very visibly tithe.
Wow.
And to be fair, I didn't tithe. I don't believe in it. I think it's dumb. It's not biblical. It's a screw job. You should. I think you should give if you want to. And I think churches.
But this is why your church didn't make it, because you don't believe in tithes.
No, and I would tell them.
You never told me about tithe.
If I ever did talk about tithing, it was always. If I ever did talk about giving, it was always very explicitly like, "Hey, if you can't afford to do this, don't do it." And this is not a tithe because that's unbiblical. But if you'd like to help us keep the lights on, if you'd like to help us with our operating expenses, nobody here takes a salary at the time. I didn't have anybody on staff that got paid, and I never got paid. But we had rent to pay, and we had bills to pay, and we got I will say fortunate, some would say we were blessed. For the 3 years that we were in operation, about once a year, somebody who did not attend our church would come and write us a big check. And I think they just, and I don't mean this cynically, but I think they were like, hey, we got to give this money away. And we knew them, but they didn't come to our church. So I'm sitting there one day, and I'm actually running the coffee shop, and this lady walks up and just hands me a $4,000 check. And I'm like, she's like, we just want you to have that. And I'm sure she used it as a tax write-off, and that's fine. But I looked at my wife, and I'm like, that's 8 months of operating expenses. So we're good for the next, we can operate for the next 8 months. And then like clockwork, a year would roll around, and she'd roll back up again with $4,000 or $5,000 check and just go, hey. And so I never felt the need. I just didn't. We had a little box in the back that at least half the time I'd forget to put out. I almost never talked about it. Now, what I did, if I'd been smart or whatever, the weeks I did talk about it, there was money in that box. The weeks I didn't talk about it, there was almost never money in that box. And I'm like, oh, let's go check the box. I'm like, oh, look at that. There's $1 and like a Tic Tac. That's amazing.
Exactly. Those gum wrappers. Right. Somebody put garbage in here.
Like, thanks, guys. But anyway, yeah. But the other churches I've been to had always made a big show. Some were very explicitly bring your tithes to the storehouse. Yes. Yada yada yada. God,
There was always special music that some soprano would sing. Breath of Heaven or something.
Yeah. I went to one church for a little while, mostly black church. And man, it was a show. Like, they didn't pass a plate. No. You brought your money to the front. And so the band would kick up and they start playing, dude. And all of a sudden people are filing out of the pews. Well, you're going to go. You're not going to sit there and go,
Yeah.
So you got pressure. Well, there's no compulsion in that. So we're like, we're bringing our tithes. And, pastor would say something, folksy, like, we like the stuff that jingles, but we sure prefer the stuff that folds. So I'm like,
I'm going to use that this Sunday.
Yeah, we like it. Stuff that jingles is good, but the stuff that folds is better. But yeah, the one church that I went to, the pastor that was the pastor of the church, I'm trying very hard not to say names because I'm sure there might be people listening who know who these people are. And I'm not trying to throw shade, but some of them are shitty. But anyway, he when I first met him, he was the associate pastor of this other church, and his sole job was to deliver a mini sermon every Sunday about tithing and offering. And he's really, really good at this. He's one of those guys who can make an anecdote of anything, and he can draw a spiritual tie or parallel to the most innocuous story. Could be his kid woke up in the middle of the night and wanted a glass of water, and he's like, "What can we learn from this? God is the one that meets all of our needs," and so. But that was a production every Sunday. Was about a 4 or 5 minute mini sermon about tithing and all the blessings that come from, that God's going to bless you, pressed down, shaken, whatever, how it goes, overflowing. There was always the promise of, there was a period of time for about 5 years or so where we were very deeply steeped in prosperity gospel stuff. So God does not just want you to be well, he wants you to be wealthy. He wants you to have, because nobody wants to serve a broke God. So you need to be a good example, and a good example is you're out there flaunting your wealth.
Yes.
So that people know, hey, if I become a Christian, then I also get rich.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not only will you not burn in hell, but you'll also be very wealthy.
Yeah, but you'll also get rich because God's God's not a God of, then they would make all these stories about how Jesus had multiple houses. He must have had money because Judas was his treasurer. There must have been money to manage if there was, it's like this whole idea that Jesus was broke. That's just a myth. He was a wealthy man. He had a treasurer, or he didn't care about money. Somebody had to manage the handful, a little bit of money they got. I don't know. It's such a weird thing. But anyway, it is what it is.
Well, this was fun.
It was fun.
I liked all this. We should do this again.
We should. What should we talk about next time?
I don't know. Something super controversial.
Yes. We had all these ideas we were going to talk about, and we get talking. It's like,
I hijacked it. I hijacked it with a million questions.
Good. I love that. You are an excellent interviewer. That's what you are. I have lost track of how many times we've had guests on, and you've asked questions that they've said, "Oh yeah, that's an insightful question. That's a good question." Your perspective on this is so important because you ask questions. Well, no, it's just your perspective is unique and helps us not just ask the same old dumb questions. You come along and go, "Oh, yeah, I didn't even thought to ask that question. It's a good question." Mm-hmm. So, good job. Well done.
Thanks.
And John is John, as always.
As always.
Yay, John.
I'll talk more next time.
Will you?
Probably not.
Well, if we were talking about the theater stuff is fascinating. I wish I had not been a dumbass when he was, because I'm like, I should have gotten involved with that. It would have been fun. Especially musical theater.
Matt, it is not too late. It is not too late.
Oh, it is way too late.
No, you should join up.
I live in a town that has no culture. Jeez. Actually, I will say this. I was always astounded, and I've actually seen this in like almost every community I've lived in. The level of talent at the local theater level would probably astonish most people. It's actually pretty good. And John also has the distinction of having worked with Sarah Bareilles for years when she was just a kid. And so John was not surprised. I didn't know Sarah. I knew her sister really well.
Yeah, so did I.
But I was sitting in my office at Face Center one day. This would have been like 2007, I guess, when her first album dropped. And for me, it was out of the blue. Like, I didn't even know Sarah Bareilles was a musician. And I knew, Stacey was. And I downloaded that album off of iTunes, which quickly became like the best-selling album iTunes had ever sold at that time. It was unbelievably fast. How I'm sure she'd been working in LA for like 4 or 5 years. So it wasn't like some kind of overnight success thing. But she kind of burst onto the scene with that first record. And I remember listening to that going, oh, that's the person that John and Greta knew her really well. Yeah. And her mom, right? Bonnie, right? Like,
I know her mom really well.
Yeah. So, it's so all of that was to say the level of talent. I think you'd be surprised if you get a chance to go to a local play or a local musical theater. I think you'll be shocked at how good it is. These aren't just hacks who sit around and go, "Oh, I couldn't make it in Broadway." Okay, almost nobody can.
Right.
Like we're talking. This is like 1% of high school football players ever play in the NFL, or probably less than even 1%. Well, same with actors. Broadway's difficult, but there are Broadway level or just below talent in probably every little small town in America, and maybe sometimes even doing it with more passion because they're just doing it because they love it. They're not necessarily trying to parlay it to some career or fame. So every time I went to see a show at Ferndale Rep, John, it's like, holy shit, these people are good. Like Jesus Christ Superstar was crazy.
Yeah, that was a fun show. Good.
Joseph of the Technicolor Dreamcoat. That was they did all, it was cool because like Ferndale Rep always did like the big musicals, like or not always, but they did the more well-known stuff because they could afford to pay the exorbitant amount of money you have to pay to do those shows. And then Redwood Curtain always did sort of more offbeat, right? I mean, their plays were cool, but they were probably a lot of times plays you'd never heard of. I don't know. All right, you guys look like you're ready to go. I'm ready to go.
This was fun. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah. Well, let's do it again.
Yeah.
We should put on our NPR voices. Yeah, this was great. This was good.
It was so lovely.
John, did you bring your recipe for the sweaty balls?
The sweaty balls.
Yeah. These are your... Never mind. All right. Now that I've talked about sweaty balls, I'll leave. But all right. Thanks for hanging out, guys. We'll be back next week with a guest that's interesting. Actually, next week will be Brian McLaren, right?
Next week we're talking to Brian McLaren again. Yeah.
Brian McLaren! See? I feel fortunate that guys like him, because he reached out to us, didn't he? Didn't his publisher reach out?
Awesome. Love that guy.
We don't have to go like, they're like, no, we'd be funny if they were like, well, we'll see if we can fit you in our schedule, Brian.
Yeah, really.
I saw Rob Bell just did a live broadcast of his 400th Robcast.
Oh, really?
So maybe now he's ready to come visit us.
Maybe.
But
fingers crossed.
I don't know. I'm over him. Screw you, Rob. We don't even like it anymore. You can maybe we start to sound disinterested. He'd be like, well, wait, why? No,
what about me?
All right, fine, Rob. You can come. Reach out to us. We'll get you set up.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
All right.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.